Nathalie Dupree Cooks is made possible in part by Publix supermarkets. Publix is pleased to support this and other quality public broadcasting programs.
Today's menu features dishes all easily prepared from a well-stocked pantry. Asparagus soup makes use of every inch of the asparagus stalk. Nathalie's Cornish hens with ginger and marmalade cook with almost no attention from the cook. And Bert's 40-carat quinoa will introduce you to a very old grain. Top it all off with Grandmother Kreiser's powder puff dinner rolls.
Hello, I'm Nathalie Dupree, and today's show is mostly going to be about things that you can use from the freezer or from the pantry cupboard, but yet have a very elegant looking meal. First thing is asparagus soup, and the first thing that you want to do is to heat your butter till it's sizzling. Now you know oil doesn't make a lot of noise in the pan, but butter is very conversational. So I have this on cooking, and I have some green onions here. Green onions seem to last a long time in the refrigerator for me, where you shouldn't refrigerate regular onions. So put them on and cook them till they're soft. Now, when asparagus is in season, it's very reasonable in price. So I buy a lot of it. Sometimes I'll have an all asparagus meal, different, maybe asparagus soup to start, and then asparagus stir-fried with chicken for a main course. And I've even had it topped with a lovely drizzled sauce, apricot sauce for dessert. So you can have an all asparagus meal if you'd like. But what I do is I cook up a lot of it, and then whenever there are extras from the dinner table, I throw them in the freezer. And I also save all the ends. And then I have them to pull out in the middle of non-asparagus time when I want that flavor and that color. They freeze pretty well 3 to 5 months. So, 3 months is what you're supposed to do, but I've let them go a little bit longer. If you want to use raw asparagus for this soup, you have to cook them longer. But anyway, I've got my onions sizzling there, and then I'm going to go ahead and add my asparagus to this. This is cooked asparagus, and I'm going to add chicken stock. And you simmer this. Tarragon, I want to get some tarragon in there. This is dried tarragon. I have really rotten luck growing tarragon. It seems to be not easy for me. Some salt and pepper, although the chicken stock was canned, and so unless you had some luscious frozen chicken stock of your own, the can will be there, and you always want to check your seasoning of that because every can of soup is a little different in terms of its salt content. And it simmers about 20 minutes, and you can simmer it covered or uncovered because you can always add more water if it's too thick or too thin. Boil it down more if it's too thin. Now, let me just show you how I prepare the asparagus originally for cooking. There's a theory that if you hold an asparagus like that and snap it, that it will snap at the place where it's most tender. Well, that may work for somebody else. It doesn't really work for me. I like to look and see where the end changes its color. This is real woody, you see. So you could definitely cut that off, and you could have gone further. So I'll go ahead and just show you those little pieces, but what I tend to do is just to cut it where I see that it needs to be cut. And these little woody ends I cook a long time, or else I can even peel them. Or sometimes I've been guilty of just throwing them into a bag and throwing them into the freezer. These wouldn't, when they're really hard and woody, like a little tree, they're not going to puree very well, but they will add flavor to your soup. So when you use them, you're going to have to use more of them than in order to get more of a puree. You're going to have to use more because less of them will go through the sieve or puree. And this is the way you peel them. And of course, you save those peels as well because they add a lot of flavor. Now, once they're all cooked, you transfer your solids to a food processor or a blender, and you just puree them till they're smooth. You can refrigerate this up to this point up to 3 days, or you can freeze it yet again if you want to. Then when you're ready, you add it to the soup. And you want to be sure that it really is pureed all the way. If necessary, go ahead and put it through, rub it through a strainer. If you have some of the woody ends in there, and you think it needs it, well, put it through a strainer. You don't want anyone to get that hard, woody stuff in their mouth. And I'm going to just put this right back in here. This is a trick. I'm holding the food processor blade with my finger, and then I'm going to put it back on, whir it around, and clean off the blade, because who wants to reach in there with that gushy asparagus stuff for the last drop? Not even I. See, and there's my immaculate blade. And now, here's this. I think I should have put this through a strainer because I see some white pieces that look a little woody. So, here we go. Stir it in. But for the sake of the exercise, I'll just show you this. And this should be on the heat. And that should be at a boil. And then you just stir in your whipping cream. You always bring it up to a boil and then reduce the heat to a simmer before you add your cream. And this is doubled, but you can see that this doesn't have that nice creamy look that this does. So maybe it got a little watery, in which case you could just add more cream. And let me just show you how to ladle it up into your bowl, straight from the soup, from the pot if you don't have a soup tureen. That soup tureen was large, and so we had to double it. And I have this feeling that probably it didn't get its second batch of cream in there for it to double, because you can see a difference in the color. So this is the way it's supposed to look. They also, trying to get something like this into a tureen, there are lots of tricks you can do. Now, I wouldn't want you to think I would do these tricks, but if you have a beautiful big tureen like this, and this is Old Country Rose by Royal Dalton, and I truly love it, and it's perfect for a country house. But if you have something large like that, but it's too large a tureen for the particular recipe that you have, one of the things that you can do is to put a heat-proof bowl, for instance, like a Pyrex. You can put it upside down in your bowl and then pour your soup on top of it, and it really can't be seen. But you better be sure that you're serving it yourself. Another thing that could be dangerous is to fill a plastic bag with marbles, seal it very tightly, and put that in there. But then, of course, with the heat, it might be a problem. Now, go ahead and just garnish with a few reserved asparagus tips. We've got more reserved here. Gracious, good, plenty more than what we need. Now, Cornish hens with ginger marmalade. And this will serve 4 to 6 people. First thing that you want to do is to remove the backbone from Cornish hens and flatten the bird. You know, if you didn't have any cream, you could also put sour cream in that asparagus soup, or even yogurt or yogurt cheese, and or yogurt, plain yogurt, and it would work, not vanilla yogurt. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is just cut out the backbone of this Cornish hen. I keep Cornish hens, freezers, and steaks, Cornish hens, chicken, and steaks in the freezer. I mean, I just think they're essentials, so that when you get desperate, you have something. I've cut out the backbone, and then I'm going to just flatten the bird, and then I'm going to put all of them in a shallow baking pan. Now, the way that you bake them will be the way that they'll turn out. So if you put this in here, it's going to bake like that, and it's just kind of going to look a little tragic like that. So you want to get them straightened out, even if you have to use 2 baking pans, or else when you serve them, you may have to cut them. You see, there's a different look to this one than to this one, and this one looks kind of, you know, catty-wampered as well. So if you want to, when you're serving them, just do it like this. Now, I have rubbed these. I just wanted to show you that. See, when you serve it like that, it's much prettier. I have rubbed these with ginger, and garlic, breast side up, and you season them to taste with salt and pepper. I just want to chop this ginger for the birds. I don't season the birds with ginger, salt, and pepper. Actually, I make a little sauce, and that seasons them. First thing you want to do with your ginger, and this can be straight from the freezer. You can freeze ginger just like that. It gets a little mushy, but it's still very usable, and I don't try to peel it unless it's the peel's very tough. Or you wrap it well, obviously. Now let's see, I've got some chopped ginger, I've got some orange marmalades and some mustard, Dijon mustard, and some red pepper flakes, and some chicken stock that I'm going to put in here. Get a good quality orange marmalade, and that's another thing that I always keep in the pantry. I do keep it refrigerated once it's open, as you should as well. And so it's very nice to have to pull out. Many of these semi-tart jams and jellies, like red currant jelly and orange marmalade, do very well in recipes. So I've got that. I'm going to turn this off. Now you just bring it to the boil it a minute, and then pour it right over your hens. Now you bake the whole thing at 400 degrees until you're going to get yours better mixed, until a meat thermometer inserted in the thigh registers 180 degrees, about 1 hour. You're going to love it, and everybody's going to think that you had some fresh oranges in the house.
Nathalie will return after a word from her guest.
Hello, my name is Tim Moran. I'm the regional sales rep for Reed & Barton Silversmiths. Reed & Barton was started in 1824 in Taunton, Massachusetts. Today our factory is still producing the finest silver-plated hollowware in the world in Taunton, Massachusetts. I'd like to talk to you about choosing flatware. Now, Reed & Barton has been designing and manufacturing flatware in the 3 major metals for 170 years. Sterling is the queen of all metals. This is the favorite metal for our designers to work in, too. Sterling is a very soft media. It's made of 92.5% silver, so a designer can get really fine details in a piece. Francis I is one of the oldest patterns in Reed & Barton's selection. In the late 1800s, it was designed in the late 1800s and won several awards before we even produced a piece. It's made of 15 different patterns, all in one set of sterling. Now, not everyone can afford sterling flatware, so we make silver-plated flatware. That is a base metal that is covered with silver, so the look is the same. Silver-plated flatware needs to be cared for in the same manner, and it's a little less expensive. Now, what we do most of these days is stainless. Stainless is the most affordable, and since the 1930s, Reed & Barton has been involved in the manufacture of stainless. It's a very hard metal and very difficult to get details. But today, we can design patterns that have the look and feel of sterling flatware. And so when you go out to look for a flatware pattern today in stainless, it's just as difficult because there are so many choices in design, weight, and feel. The first thing you're going to look for in sterling flatware is the composition of the metal itself. Stainless steel is 3 different metals combined. Of course, steel is the bulk of it. 18% is chromium, and this gives it a resistance to staining. 8% is nickel, and that gives it a lustrous finish, so you can be closer to the way sterling looks. That 18 and 8 is usually printed on the back of the piece, and if you'll look on the back when you're shopping, you'll see 18 and 8 on the back of pieces that are made with that ingredient mix. That indicates that it's the finest stainless for your table. Now, next you have to choose a design. That's most important. You're going to match that to your china pattern and your crystal pattern. There are a lot of different designs available. But more important, once you've chosen your design, is the weight and feel. All these patterns are of different sizes. Our European heritage, we call it play size large or dinner size. These pieces are large. They feel big in your hand. The American standard is called play size, and you can see the difference in the sizing there. So when you go out looking for flatware, you're going to have to pick up these pieces and feel the difference and feel what is comfortable in your hand. Not everyone is going to be happy with the same size of flatware. Now, after you've chosen your stainless, You may want to mix in some other metals. Sterling flatware serving pieces match up beautifully with a lot of the patterns you'll see in stainless. So you'll have your basic setting pieces in stainless, and you'll add an accent, a different pattern, a different look. Sterling sparkles when you put it out on the table, and you can add that around your table to make the table setting that much more beautiful. Now, Reed & Barton has done some other things as far as design, and we not only design products now, but we have Ralph Lauren and the Swid Powell Group taking other forms of design and bringing them to your tabletop. So have fun. Pick out something that's beautiful, feels good in your hand, and enjoy.
I was talking about always keeping Cornish hens in the freezer. You know to pull out the insides if there are any, if there's a little package in there before you freeze them. Although they look like they would be just so perfect to freeze right in their wrapper when you get them from the store, it's hard to defrost them if they're stuffed full of things. Now, these are my grandmother Kreiser's powder puff rolls, and these are very special to me. The particular Grandmother Kreiser that did these was really a second cousin twice wife, but my family was a family of bakers, and they're very traditional old-time rolls. They're just, you know, as one cousin said, they're light enough to powder your face, and they're just perfect for lunch or dinner. And they're particularly pretty and perfect with this Royal Dalton Old Country Rose, because that's really the era that rolls became important in American cuisine. This Grandmother Kreiser was from Minnesota. Now, you can make these rolls in a food processor, which I'm sure she never did, or by hand in a large bowl. First thing that you want to do is to dissolve a package of yeast and a tablespoon of sugar and a half a cup of warm water. Sooner or later, I'm going to learn to stop leaning on the food processor bowl when I talk to you. You always want your warm water to be between 105 and 115 degrees. You always want some sugar for that yeast to eat. Now, scald some milk by just bringing it up to the boil. And I do that in the microwave because I'm bone lazy, as you might know. Small little bubbles appear around the edge of the pan. And then go ahead and add 3 tablespoons of sugar, 3 tablespoons of butter, and 2 teaspoons of salt. And then let that mixture cool to warm, just in case you had it too hot, like 105 degrees or so. And then add 1 lightly beaten egg and the yeast mixture. And here is some yeast that's been proofing. And so it has more than doubled. It's happy that it's alive. Just gave a little sigh. You may not have seen it, which means that it might have eaten up all the sugar. So I better give it a little boost more. It's been sitting there for a while. If it rises and then collapse, whether it's your bread or your yeast itself, it means that it's eaten everything that there is to eat, and it needs more. If that happens to you with your whole bread dough or with your yeast, just knead in more dissolved sugar, like if it was a whole dough that had risen and collapsed because you had to go to the grocery store or something like that. Run and pick the kids up. I've got some flour, bread flour in here. The ratio of liquid to flour is usually 3 to 1. So this is about 3½ cups of bread flour. And this is a nice large food processor. And you can almost tell by the food processor sound whether or not you have enough flour in it. Now, if you were doing it by hand, you would just beat it with a wooden spoon to a smooth dough. My family actually were grocers and bakers. That's what we were. And turn it out onto a floured board and knead, or else just add a smidgen more flour. And this is almost riding on top of the blade. I use the steel knife blade. A lot of people use the kneading blade with the white plastic blade, and that's fine if you want to. It's just that I use the blade that's out, and particularly if I'm in a hurry, I just tend to use whatever blade I can get to fast. Now you just knead it until it's elastic and smooth as a baby's bottom, and this is just about there. Elastic means that it's like a rubber band. It'll bounce back when you touch it. So there we are. And you can even let a bread rise in the food processor bowl. And it's coming back. It probably needs a little bit longer. I put it in an oiled plastic bag, but you can oil a bowl and turn it and cover it with plastic wrap if you want to. You just don't want it to form a skin. Bread is so easy to make that I really recommend that you try it. And just remember that it's cheap. You know, I mean, you're only going to maybe lose $1 if it doesn't work out the first time. Now, you let it double, and here it is when it has doubled enough. You put 2 holes in it with your fingers, or you could put a dozen holes in it if you want to. And when it's doubled enough, it won't bounce back. Now, you lightly grease a baking pan, you punch it down, and by the way, you can refrigerate this dough for several days in a plastic bag and just pull out what you need if you don't want to make gracious plenty of rolls like this. You punch down the dough, you knead it lightly, and then you pinch off a piece of the dough. And what I've done is I've cupped my hand, and I'm going to put the piece of dough there, and I'm working my hand, just these 2 fingers. The dough is riding on the top of my hand. Oop. I think I burned my butter. Excuse me, I'm just going to cover this here. My first mistake. I'm going to roll them into little balls, and then you put each one next to each other. Now, you do want to make them all the same size so that they rise evenly. Another way of doing this is to throw it onto the board, put your hand on top, and roll like that with the top of your hand and put it in here. Okay, so there we are. You let it double, and then you bake it 20 to 25 minutes. These are not quite doubled. Just run them into the oven, and I'm going to pull some other ones out. When you're letting them double, let them double in a warm place. And I really like this little rack that comes out on top here. Because it's warm enough, but yet it won't overcook them. And so put those, once they're doubled, put them into the 350-degree preheated oven. Aren't they beautiful? And now I'm going to make an interesting little glaze. You know, if you do something at home, you want to make it taste good. This is not the kind of thing, particularly for a fancy little dinner party like this. By the way, these rolls freeze after you've made them. So I am brushing them with milk and sugar. 2 tablespoons of sugar are in there, and you just brush them, and you put them in the oven for 10 more minutes. And they just look brassy and bold and wonderful and just melt in your mouth. Terrific. That sugar kind of gives them a little shine. And then remove them from the pan and cool them on a rack. You'll love them. Now, this is Bert Green's 40-carat quinoa. Bert Green was a very, very good friend of mine, and after he's passed on, I've tried to work one of his recipes in every one of my books. Quinoa is a very light-sensitive plant. It was once a staple food of the Incas, and this got its name from the gold carrots in Bert Green's book, Green on Grains. First thing I want to do is to saute some onion, curry powder, and carrots in the butter, and I'm just going to wipe out this pan. Ha! Less than perfect world. Well, maybe I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use this other pan. I'm going to go ahead and add the onions, and of course we could just pretend, for the sake of this exercise, that this is a non-stick pan, but you could add butter. And I've got some carrots right here that I'm adding. Then chicken stock gets added. And then you stir in your, and you cook that all together about 20 minutes. And then you puree your solids, which are here. You return this puree to the pan and add additional chicken stock and bring to the boil. And then you stir in the quinoa and reduce the heat and simmer it covered until the quinoa is nice and tender. And then stir in some cumin. I meant to show you that a little more carefully. I don't know. I hope you can get a close-up of that and see how interesting that quinoa is. And then sprinkle it with parsley. And if you have trouble, a good alternative would be rice with dried fruit, which is right here. And a nice light dessert would be coconut custard pie.
Today's savory menu features dishes all easily prepared from a well-stocked pantry. Asparagus soup makes use of every inch of the asparagus stalk. Nathalie's Cornish hens with ginger and marmalade cook with almost no attention from the cook. And Bert's 40-carat quinoa will introduce you to a very old grain. Top it all off with Grandmother Kreiser's Powder Puff Dinner Rolls.
All the recipes in this program and in the entire series are available in Nathalie Dupree Cooks Everyday Meals from a Well-Stocked Pantry, published by Clarkson Potter. This book contains a collection of over 150 recipes, complete with do-ahead and storage tips. Order your copy by calling the number on your screen. The price is $20 plus shipping and handling. Please have your credit card ready when you call 1-800-235-3000 for Nathalie Dupree Cooks Everyday Meals from a Well-Stocked Pantry.
It's hard sometimes to keep butter on hand. Butter does freeze well for about 3 months. It's best removed from the carton, re-wrapped in freezer wrap, or put in a freezer-type plastic bag. I admit I have frozen in the box, but I have not been happy with the results. I prefer using salted butter because I find that unsalted butter takes on the flavors from the refrigerator if I don't use it up within a week. I keep unsalted in the freezer for baking, or I omit the extra salt from baking if the salted butter is all that I have. I leave my butter out of the refrigerator in a covered baking butter dish whenever possible because I love soft butter on my bread, and I think you use less when it's at room temperature and it's spreadable than when it's hard to cut and you get those little lumps on your bread. Margarine may, of course, be substituted if you want a trans fat and does keep well in the refrigerator, but I prefer butter.
Nathalie Dupree Cooks is made possible in part by Publix Supermarkets. Publix is pleased to support this and other quality public broadcasting programs.